Welcome to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Tim Wilkins.
Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Wilkins, and today I'm joined by the co-host Chris, joining me once again. Today's topic, we're talking about the Daytona 500, the crapshoot that it always is. And obviously, we'd like to congratulate Ricky Stenhouse Jr. For another monumental Daytona 500, but it's also his victory of the Daytona 500. And not to be a spoiler, but that's who won. Chris, I think this year was more of a crapshoot than other years. Maybe I could be wrong there, but it seemed like there was a lot of just unknowns, and there were some guys up in the front at the very end that are always up front because they hang out in the back all race long, and a lot of no names that we don't hear about finishing the top 15. Guys that are rookies finishing the top 15, and that's what makes Daytona so great. So hope you enjoyed your viewing of the Daytona 500. I know I sure the heck did. But see how it goes, man. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., the winner. Winner from a very small team, Chris. I think we could talk about the history of JT Jordy Racing a little bit and where they come from and how they actually got to where they are a little bit.
Yeah, it's good to be back, Tim, and talk a little bit about the 65th running of the Daytona 500 last Sunday. Yeah, obviously, really, spectacle event there. A lot of pageantry. Obviously, with this being NASCAR's 75th season, a lot of emphasis on the history of the sport. So you saw something unique with all former Daytona 500 winners and champions honored, who actually gave the command to start engines before the race. But yeah, I mean, obviously, as you said and perfectly said, the Daytona 500 is the ultimate crapshoot. You could have your guys who typically run up front every week who get caught up in wrecks late and are taken out of it. You can have a surprise winner like an Austin Cindric in 2022, and then Ricky Stenhouse this year. But definitely cool for that organization. JTG Doherty Racing. They're a small team, one car effort. Actually, they were a two car effort up until a couple of seasons ago when they sold one of their charters away, or were actually releasing a charter, and then was purchased by another team. So with the viability of those charters from an economic standpoint, it didn't make sense to them to keep a second car. So one car effort for them. Tad and Jody Geschecter have been longtime folks in the sport, dating back well over 25 years. Started in what was the Busch Series, the Xfinity Series. Tad himself was a Procter and Gamble guy for a long time, and actually brought Tide into the sport back in the 1980s there with Darrell Waltrip. He's obviously been heavily involved with Kroger and all the different various vendor partners that they have. So in terms of the size and scope of the team, it's a small team, but they are, through the work of Tad and Jody, of obviously have a lot of financial resources for a team of that size. And then obviously Brad Doherty being involved, he's a lifelong race fan and has been an investor in the sport and been a part of the sport for a long time, both from a team ownership standpoint and also from obviously a television standpoint, the work he did with ESPN and then now with NBC. So definitely a cool story. Ricky kind of he's kind of the forgotten guy. He won 2 Xfinity championships in the early 2010s and had a kind of a flat to not as good of a time at the downfall of Roush that he was when he was there, and then went to JTG and has actually been fairly competitive on the plate tracks around the restrictor super speedway tracks, and finally something worked out for him this past Sunday.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, it definitely wasn't entertaining Daytona 500. I mean, it's always a crapshoot, like we talk about, and uh, let's kind of go through the timeline here. There's a series of wrecks throughout the race that kind of knock out some of the major contenders, including Ryan Blaney, who pretty much I have to give a lot of props for the number 12 team to kind of fight back, get themselves back on the lead lap with about 17 laps to go, and just get up there in contention. The car is obviously a little hurt. This from looking at a cosmetic damage standpoint. Uh, Damaged car policy is obviously in effect, so they can't be sitting there on the on pit road all day long working on it. But they get the car running pretty solid, get themselves in contention for the last go around. And you know, I think Chris, when we watch the Daytona 500, we always kind of wait for the last 25 laps because a lot of guys, a lot of movers and shakers are moving their ways around. And one of the few things I think Kyle Busch talks about on the radio for the race, they kind of have a splice of that radio, that earshot. He says, "Well, if it was a normal length, I would be the winner right now." And I hate to say this to Kyle, and I know he doesn't listen to this, but it the Daytona 500 was literally won by less than a car length this year, and it has been won by less than a car length on numerous occasions throughout the history of the Daytona 500. So it obviously the safety rules come in play here. They race the green, white, checkered. There's a wreck, which I believe is the most stupidest wreck there possibly could be in racing. I understand you're racing for the win. It's coming down. The white flag is, I believe, the green white checker was in effect, so the green was waved. They were coming to the white on 3 and 4, and Eric Amarola, for some way, shape, or form, bumps Travis Pastrana, and this causes a chain reaction. Which, by the way, Travis Pastrana, for being a rookie, did a heck of a job, and so did Connor Daly, and so did a lot of these other rookies. They kind of did they gave themselves credence to be there. I think, Chris, we can say that with these rookie class this year at Daytona.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
there.
no doubt about it. Here's a guy
Uh,
like Riley Herbst out of the, regular in the Xfinity Series, finishing 10th for Rick Ware Racing. So there were definitely some guys who just again kind of kept, like you said, kind of kept their nose clean all day, stayed out of the big wrecks, and then when obviously all hell breaks loose, as is the case normally on these super speedways, they took advantage to have strong finishes.
yeah, and I mean, if you watch, everyone can go back and watch the replay for themselves on what I'm talking about here. But it looks like the 10 car kind of bumps Travis Pastrana in the corner, which breaks a very fundamental rule of plate restrictive plate, yeah, plate racing to begin with, and that is you don't bump in the corners. You don't push the pusher, and you don't bump in the corners because, especially with these cars feel a lot looser in the corners, or at least coming off the corners, and it kind of led a chain reaction there. I don't blame Travis for that. I think that's just a racer's race situation there, and if you watch a sequence of events, Kyle Larson was going for a move too that kind of made it 3 wide going into 3 and 4. And I was surprised by that. But at the same time, if you watch that kind of sequence, he was trying to make a move coming to the white, which he still had plenty of time. Chris, I think you can attest to this. He had almost a lap and a half to go still to kind of make a push if he really needed to. But I think that moved a little preemptive. And Joey Logano was
Yeah,
there with I think at the same time you're running out of patience because something's going to happen, right? So
yeah, yeah, and you're also got to position yourself to where you need to be, and at the end of these races, you also if you're a driver, you're also factoring in, hey, the wreck's going to happen if the caution comes out on the white flag lap. This race is over, so it's kind of dog eat dog at that point. Not saying some of the moves, yes, I agree with you, were very very low percentage towards the end of that race for sure, but once you start getting in those last 10, 10, 5 to 10 laps
Well,
and
yeah,
really get.
during the green flag, I not to cut you off there, but I agree with some of the moves that were getting done during the I would say the regulation side of the race. Once we got to that last lap, I think Larson had listen. I'm not by any means a crazy Kyle Larson fan, but I was wondering why he made it 3 wide at one point. I mean, Logano was pushing him, right? So Logano was pushing. And it seemed like to me Larson went low and Logano was hung out to dry for a little bit there into that corner before the yellow got thrown for the final the result there. But it In my opinion, just saying me being me here, Chris, I think if Larson hung up to the top and let Logano push him, Hendrick, 5 would be the winner there, just because of how Logano, and this is going back to the manufacturers, and we'll talk about those guys. It truly is a remarkable conversation to talk about how Joey Logano was the only Ford in the top 5 for the result of that race. With, Ryan Blaney did a hell of a job getting himself back in contention in this race, but was he going to be a major player down the road? Who knows? We didn't have a chance to see that. We really didn't, because he wasn't given the opportunity there with that wreck. So,
Yeah.
Chris, I think the Chevys, something's definitely going on with the Chevys and Toyotas here, and I'm not really sure if
Well,
it's
the Chevys have at that again, and you brought up a great point there about Joey. I mean, at that point, all of his Ford help was gone. You figure Blaney was damaged, Cindric was damaged in terms, Burton
Well,
was
let me
kind
ask
of
you
out
this,
of it.
Chris. Let me ask you this: was Blaney under power at that point in the race? Was he horsepower wise bad, or was he just aero bad? Which, by the way,
I mean,
being aero bad at Daytona with the last lap, hell, he could stick on the back of bumper and just push. I mean, at that point,
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, and yeah, he would be the only person that would kind of know. But I mean, when you're missing basically your whole right front fender, I mean, that car is basically a parachute in the air.
Yeah, you're right.
Once you've done any damage to the body of that car, significant damage.
Which they
It's
touted, by the way. They touted that these cars are, they can handle the damage. And yeah, logistically, Chris, the car looked cosmetically okay. But like you say, it's like a driving around with a parachute. So,
Yeah, Bubba Wallace got turned into the wall from a push from Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. And that car, the body of that car did not look torn up at that point. But I'm sure with any type of significant contact to the wall, definitely is not advantageous towards the performance of the car itself.
of
So
course not.
um,
Not the plate tracks, that's for sure.
no, but getting back to it, yeah. In terms of the Chevys there at the end, I mean, and where Logano was, and I mean, again, Logano was the only real Ford left. All the other Fords had either been taken out in accidents and/or were out of track position or contention itself. So really, the Chevrolets, which already do have a strength in numbers, just in solely how many Chevrolets are competing in the Cup Series, definitely had a numbers advantage on Logano. So the fact that he even was able to have himself in contention to win there with no other manufacturer support was shows why he's a two-time and reigning Cup Series champion.
I believe Logano, and I think Penske as a whole did a heck of a job. I think Austin kind of got caught up in some nonsense in the back or in the middle of the race that kind of could have been avoided. I mean, a lot of guys, I'm not sure why it got so dang racy in the middle of the race. I mean, I get it. You guys want to go race for stage points, that's fine. But these guys, if you watch a lot of these plate races, they'll let off the gas and let guys go by them all day long. They don't, they're riding the back for 200 laps if they want. But at the same time, it to me, Chevy, something's going on with the manufacturers, and I'm not sure if it's R&D related. But some of these guys, when it comes to pushing at plate tracks and the Chevys now, I remember back in the old car before this car that it was kind of a point of contention of the pointed bodies compared to the rounded bodies by Ford, and just got themselves in a weird conversation where Chevys weren't really, accepted, I guess you can say, as good draft partners. And I don't see it this way now, but I see like Ford is going to be strong at these plate tracks, but at the same time, when you have nobody up there, it makes it a brutal race for a guy that's only one manufacturer,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, alluding to a good point there. This year, the second year of the next gen car, all three manufacturers were granted new nose designs. So I know one of the things that the Chevrolets, just through reading, had been working on was getting rid of that pointiness that the nose on the Camaro has, compared to the kind of flatter, obviously flatter nose on the Mustang, and then also on the Camry itself. So there have been some cosmetic adjustments that have been done, but generally speaking, the talk is that the Fords, their bumpers line up better with the tail, because all the tail sections are the same on the cars essentially. So in terms of the manufacturers, the nose of the Ford lines up better than the other two manufacturers itself. So that's why I think that the Fords can be more aggressive in terms of the tandem and the pushing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, man, it was a good race. It's just one of those things that in the NASCAR season, you kind of have to go with momentum. And for obviously Ricky Stenhouse, we haven't even alluded to the winner of this race, which, his fanfare. He's a dirt track guy, and if you look at the top 3 or the top 5 for the most part of that race, besides Logano, they were all dirt track guys. They all knew each other. Like, they kind of knew Logano, Larson, they all knew how to race around each other. So it wasn't going to be dirty. It wasn't going to be a wreck fest. It was kind of straightforward as straightforward could be when it comes to racing. But, Christopher Bell, I think they sent the 17 and the 20, I believe, or I'm sorry, the 48 and I think for further inspection. I think it was a 48 and the 17 of Chris Buescher back to the NASCAR R&D for further inspection, which tells me that they saw something on secondary inspection they didn't like, so they're going to take a further look and see what's up.
Well, actually, generally, what they'll do after, at least I've seen, what they'll generally do after is, especially after a race like this, with this being the excuse me, first race of the season, they'll generally take take a car back from each manufacturer, and they'll do a an aero check to see if there's any need for adjustments to make sure that the aero numbers for each of the cars are as equal as can be. They'll also look at put the cars on the dyno and see in terms of the horsepower aspect how much difference there is. So it's kind of more of a standardized type deal.
Yeah, I'm not discrediting anybody's involvement in that. I think it's just a lot of guys, and I would say maybe they decided, hey, those 2 cars at the beginning of the race are going to go back for further, and maybe I'm just sparking up a smoke screen here, but at the same time, it seems like usually when it comes to those, just in years past, they don't like they don't necessarily have enough time to further inspect everything at the time of secondary inspection, and they want to take it back just to have a better look. And they might not find anything, Chris. I think we've seen it many times where they do that and they don't find any damn thing. But
yeah,
and it's just a matter of, hey, if the teams knew ahead of time, it wouldn't be a fun secondary inspection. Let's put it that way.
Which last year actually they did find something with Brad Keselowski. That was why he was docked that large penalty because of an issue with modifying a single source parts. Which obviously with this new next gen car has been something that has been heavily frowned upon. Is any type of modification to any of the single source parts that are being used on this car. So I will say, and I know we want to touch on it real quick, was the we're calling the manufacturer manipulation that we're seeing in a lot of these plate races, or I know we say restrictor plate races, but technically not restrictor plates anymore. So super speedway races, I should say.
They're still plate races to me, buddy. It's like a pack of cigarettes it's sponsored by Winston.
What you're seeing now, I think this has really kind of been a trend over the last, I'd say 5 to 6 years now. Is used to be the plate races. If you worked with a guy, whether he was driving a Ford or a Chevy or a Toyota, or if you want to go further back, a Pontiac, and regardless of what manufacturer, where if you guys worked well together, there wasn't this whole idea of manufacturers working together. But now, and it's really more. It was really definitely more obvious in the duels in the qualifying race last Thursday, where you had all the Chevrolets pit together under green, and then you had, I think maybe 3 or 4 laps later, all the Fords come together and pit together. And because of the distance and the amount of cars and the energy that they had, the Chevys had no shot at catching the Fords, which really kind of took away from the race. So I think that's one of the things.
I don't think Fords have a problem with that. Do you? That's not the Ford's fault that Chevy can't catch up.
But what we're seeing now is that instead of going, instead of drivers, racing all out, or hey, I work really well with this guy, even though he's with a competing make. Now we're seeing where, you cannot, teams are not, now these manufacturers are so heavily involved in what I'm calling manipulation of these races that, in some ways it's taking away from it, from the
Well,
event itself.
when it comes to less than 5 laps to go, man, I don't know about you, but some of these racers can throw all that crap out the window for a second. If I'm get like, for example, look at the last 2-3 laps of that race. Logano is pushing Stenhouse to the point, or no, Stenhouse makes the move to the top side after clearing. Did I make that correct? Yeah, that whole sequence of events in
Yep.
the last series of laps, Logano's pushing Larson. Sorry, I messed up who's pushing who there, but like Logano, who's in a Ford, is pushing a Chevy, who is Kyle Larson, right? So
Yep.
on the outside, and even Logano said it in post race interviews, he couldn't get to the bottom because his car wasn't handling well. That tells a lot because, by the way, handling at these races has never in the past been a big thing.
Yep.
It's never been a thing. So for a guy to say, "Listen, I'm better up on top," that's fine. I mean, that's but to me, I think Ford will counter your argument with this, saying, "Hey, listen, we let Chevy have them be able to round off and refix the nose of their car to make it more conducive. We're going to do our thing." And and that's what Ford's going to argue is saying, "Hey, listen, we let Chevy fix the nose of their car to make it more round and make it more, I would say, conducive to bump drafting and things like that." We didn't have to do that, and we did. But if you watch, you're right. During the dual races, it was a no-brainer. It's still a no-brainer, even in the truck series, which we won't talk about today. But the truck race and an Xfinity race, highly entertaining weekend at Daytona. I wish some of those races didn't get rain delayed and rain fixed, but which, I mean, it's Florida, other than alligators and other things that we won't talk about on air, thanks to MSNBC. We'll talk about that later. But it's just a matter of Daytona being Daytona. It's a crapshoot. Like, where were you going to be if you were Ricky Stenhouse in that situation? You were he actually moves up to try to block. And so guys make moves, and that's just how the racing is at this time of year. We are going to Fontana, which not sure what to really think about this. This is the last go around of Fontana at the 2-mile track, which, it's been around a long time. The racing is obviously multi-grooved, and it's really entertaining to be a race car driver there. But yeah, Chris, I think Daytona is kind of, as the 75th running of the Daytona 500, you just kind of have to go. It is what it is. It is the Great American Race. If anyone's never been before, you are missing out, my friends and good people. It is an amazing race to watch every year. Still packing the grandstands. It's a good thing this year, man. So I don't know about you and your viewings on it, but I think the race overall was good. I could have seen a different winner personally, but good for a small race team to kind of get a win there. Obviously, kind of gives a shot in the arm for them too, going for the year that they have a race championship to compete for. So
Yeah, I mean, now you're locked into the playoffs now. You're the first guy that's locked in. So yeah, obviously looking towards this weekend in Fontana Auto Club Speedway. As you mentioned, yeah, officially last race on the 2-mile Auto Club Speedway after 26 years. So now the plan is that it will be switched over to a short track. Just no one really knows the time frame right now of when that switch and when the track will be available. No one knows what's going to happen looking towards 2024. Where this date will end up in the interim. So, but yeah, definitely going to be an interesting weekend of racing out at Auto Club Speedway. Certainly, this is going to be where we'll find out who's the cream will rise to the top here and see whose cars are who's got the best handling cars. Looking Daytona itself is kind of a crapshoot. Now we'll see who really has the speed and who's been working hard in the off season to get their cars driving good as we head towards start the West Coast swing of the season here with Auto Club, and then head off to Vegas, and then finish the West Coast swing in Phoenix.
Yeah, no, and I think this swing is kind of unique. The West Coast is obviously, with them going out to do the Busch Clash race out there in LA Coliseum, which I won't comment further on that anymore, but they do that first and they go back to Daytona and then go back out to California. It kind of dampens, in my view, the West Coast swing a little bit. As a logistics guy, it kind of puts a damper on that too. But at the same time, I think Fontana will show really the racer's racer on how to do this, because it's multi-groove. It's a lot of guys like ripping the top, guys like ripping the bottom, mid groove. They do multiple grooves in that track, and it's really fun to see who has a good car, who also has been in the sport a long time. Some rookies that actually enjoy that track, which is kind of random, but they do. Same thing with Las Vegas. Vegas has become a multiple groove track now. And that's where you start to see some of the handling you're talking about, the off-season work. Heck, even mid-season work from last time they were there. They take those notes and bring them back to the track again. I think, Chris, overall, man, I think good Daytona 500. Overall, this good start of the season. Interesting sports world going on right now, but NASCAR is definitely there to help us out, kind of break up the monotony of the rest of the seasons, not getting off to this, not beginning yet or in between. So appreciate you joining me as always. It's been a cool time, and hopefully sometime next week we'll talk about some more sports. We'll have a lot of stuff going on the horizon here, everybody. So Chris, I appreciate you joining me once again, and thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to follow us on social media via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.